Welcome to sNAPAshots, conversations with practicing, professional, and applied anthropologists. Let's meet our next practicing anthropologist, Nazia Hussain.
I'm Nazia Hussain. My pronouns are she, hers. I am a South Asian woman with brown skin, dark black hair, and wearing glasses. Currently, I am a project researcher focused on human-centered design with the Centers for Medicaid for the federal government.
How did you get interested in anthropology?
In my undergrad, when I first entered college, I didn't really know what anthropology was. But when I learned about it, I decided I wanted to major in it. And so I studied physical anthropology in my undergrad and then medical anthropology in my graduate training. And one of the reasons I decided to sort of get into anthropology or continue on with it rather was before that, I was on a pretty traditional trajectory to go to medical school. But then I wanted to set myself apart. And that's why I decided to major in something that wasn't chemistry or biology. But then really it was my final year of school after I had taken the MCAT and after I was already starting to apply to medical schools that I realized I wanted to study healthcare and not medicine. And that's when I felt like continuing on the anthropology route was the right thing for me.
How has the anthropological perspective or training enhanced your contribution to your workplace?
I've worked in a lot of different industries and areas, from population health to community engagement, and most recently in public health, but in the digital civic tech space. But for me, the running thread across these areas has been the way I approach a problem. I think the quote anthropological mindset isn't just one thing. It's the use of certain skills and critical inquiry, but also the less tangible parts of inquiry, like relationships or building trust and rapport. And for me, honing in on that latter half has been a major factor and component of how I've been successful in these various workplaces, especially when working with non-anthropologists or those that are in the social sciences.
What types of industry challenges do you get to help solve with this anthropological lens?
Because most of my research focus has been around things like engagement and implementation of programs and policies, for me, it's always been about the end user. How do we solve for or improve or radically dismantle something that's not working right now for a specific group of people? And so I think those are some of those wicked challenges that I love to sort of tackle and always think about who is this impacting at the end of the day.
What anthropological skills do you use in your field?
I do use interviewing a lot, surveying, those types of things, but I'd say really it's the ways in which I approach problems with ensuring sustainability or longevity. It's not necessarily a hard skill or tangible skill that we think about it in those terms, but it's very valuable. It's tremendously valuable, I'd say, especially when working in many different project spaces or industries. Sometimes anthropologists aren't wholly welcomed in certain communities because of a history of coming into an area, disrupting things, and then leaving. So I always aim to think about the long term. Is this community saying X over Y? The thing that we're implementing or changing, is this useful for them? And so thinking about longevity and sustainability, I think, is a skill that I always bring to my workspace.
Do you recall a moment that changed the way you practice anthropology?
I did have a major shift in the way I research and the way I approach work when I was in the policy world. That's when I felt like I had to radically change, not just the way I practice anthropology, but how I think about impact. And so I was working in a space where I saw firsthand the impacts of legislative policy on some of the communities that were part of the current project at the time. And it was then I was able to move from the approach that I was using before, which was question, answer, resolve, into one that was more about creating paradigm shifts and organizational or cultural changes.
What is one thing about the practice of anthropology that nobody told you about as a student?
More than just interviewing. It's more than just questions and finding solutions. I learned that research practice includes things like creating a budget, talking to stakeholders, pitching oneself, telling people what the value of my approach and the, anthropological methods are. And then the fact that I'll never work with another anthropologist ever again, maybe one or two at most, but it's about working interdisciplinarily and speaking to different types of people from different types of backgrounds and skill sets, but making sure, you're coming together to solve some sort of problem. And I feel like I never really learned that as a student.
What would you like to pass on to future anthropologists seeking roles in professional fields?
It's important to explore, especially if you're going to envision yourself being more of a practicing anthropologist outside of academia. I think it's also understanding how you want to practice your discipline, what impacts you want to make. Anthropology can look like a lot of different things depending on your context. And I think it's important to understand that anthropology doesn't have to look like the way you read about it in school or in the manuscripts and the works that you sort of absorb in the classroom. And so knowing that, I think, is gonna make it that much more valuable when you're sort of seeking a new role or learning how to position yourself in a certain space.
How did anthropology show up in your early life?
I think a lot of the experiences I had growing up, I reflect on today. I've worked with a lot of different immigrant communities, and being an immigrant myself and having all the experiences I did with, accessing or engaging with public services, which is a big part of my research focus. Just keeping those in mind and thinking about those from time to time, I feel helps me in my work, no matter the project that I'm on. It influences my work in ways where I can be more self-reflexive and understand, things like being more empathetic, but then also knowing, what my position is. And so I think it's a little bit challenging to, sometimes think back to your childhood, but I'd say the common theme is just like the experiences I had. I see that in a lot of the communities that I work with. And so that just strengthens my ability to be critical and listen and learn from.
Thank you, Nazia, for sharing your experience as a practicing medical anthropologist. For more sNAPAshots, find us at practicinganthropology.org, Meta, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Join NAPA at the Careers Expo on November 10th, 2023 in Toronto, Canada. We look forward to seeing you there.
This is great. I think I love that NAPA's doing this. I love that the students are involved with the interviews, and I feel like I'm sure you're learning a lot talking to people. And so I love this. This is fantastic.
sNAPAshot.